Our opening words are by Nevin Bush from an essay titled The Fellowship of the World. When people utter an expression of their inner faith, the same words keep cropping up: God, man, dignity, the future, the earth, forever, and so on. Now, my basic belief is that I don't like to ride in taxi cabs. Does that sound silly? Well, let me put it this way. Life is a journey. It's a ride from here to there. You step out of one door and you go to another door. There's a clock ticking in front of you that measures off your time. You're charged with that time. You don't know until the end of the trip just what your charge will be. You step out of the cab and you say goodbye to the driver, or you just walk away. That's all. The end of the trip. Now, how can this be a faith? Not to ride in taxi cabs. So let's consider the alternatives. You can ride in a cab or you can ride in a subway. And what about the subway? There at least you're not alone. You get on the train, you bang into people, the train buckles and rolls, the air is bad, it doesn't smell good, but life is going on, and life doesn't smell good either. Yet somehow it's wonderful. In the subway there are lots of people. All kinds. Wholesome people, beautiful people, miserable people. All these are a part of life, our comrades, our fellow wayfarers. Riding in a taxi cab, one lacks for company. The way I make the trip then can be my faith. Words don't count. It's what I do, how I like to travel. When I pray, I can lock the door of my office and pray by myself, or, well, that's like riding in a taxi cab. Or I can go to church, I can pray in a temple or a cathedral where thousands of people pass in and out every day. They're all praying too. They are taking the same ride as I am. And in mingling my prayers with them, I join the fellowship of the world in humility before the mysteries that surround the journey. I think that is the way to take the ride. And now I light our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, in humility before the mysteries that surround the journey and in gratitude that we journey together. Our first hymn is number 1010 in your teal hymnal. We give thanks. Please rise in body and spirit. I would ask you to refrain from singing the first verse until Steve goes through the whole thing so we can get a gist of what the song is like. So once again, please rise in body and spirit.
So welcome to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we come together every week as a people with diverse beliefs and a shared commitment to bring more peace, love, and justice into the world. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you worship one God, many gods, or no God, you are welcome here. I want to say a special welcome to our visitors this morning in person or on Zoom. We are so glad you are with us today. In the sanctuary, you can find a blue connection card at the end of each pew. You are invited to fill that out. Give it to the ushers when we take the offering. We will add you to our mailing list so you can get connected to the life of the church. In Zoom, we'll put a link in the chat. You can fill out a digital connection card. Parents and caregivers of little ones, there's a nursery available downstairs for your convenience, but we are always delighted to have our little ones here in the sanctuary as well. And everyone is invited to join us after the service in the common room for coffee, tea, and fellowship. There is also a quiet space set upstairs in room 201 as an additional place for conversation and connection. And there's coffee service and snacks in that room as well. So a few announcements this morning. First of all, next Sunday after the service, next Sunday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m., our monthly games group is meeting. So if you like learning games, sharing games, playing games, laughter and community and things like that, please come out and join us next Sunday, 2 to 5. After the service today, our lay pastoral care team will have a caring table in the social hall where you can send a card to someone at First Parish who could use a kind word or just to know that you're thinking about them. So please stop by that table if you'd like to send a card. There are two things related to the Stop Private Jet expansion campaign for you to know about. The first is that through May 10th is the public comment period, which is your formal opportunity to voice your opposition, if you are so opposed, to the developer's report regarding the Hanscom Airfield expansion project for private jets. So to learn more about that, stop by the EJC table after the service, and your comments really count. The next public standout in Bedford opposing the jet expansion is this Thursday, April 18th from 4 to 5 p.m. at Veterans Memorial Park on Great Road. Signs will be there for you to use. You can also bring your own. The dates for the standouts in Bedford are in the Bedford Citizen Calendar. Other dates for standouts in other locations are at the website, which is spje.org. And finally, we need delegates to represent First Parish Bedford at the annual General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, which is coming up towards the end of June. It is a virtual GA this year, so you can attend without even having to leave your living room. It could not be more convenient. And this is a big one, because at this General Assembly, we will be voting on the proposed revision to the 7 principles. Bedford gets 7 delegates. We have 2 right now. So we have 5 more slots to fill, if I did that math correctly. Financial support is available to help cover the cost of registration. If you're interested in being a delegate, please email me at minister@uubedford.org. And now I would like to invite Rich Suval up for special stewardship announcements.
Morning. That's cool. My name is Rich Subal. I have been a member here since 2018. That's 6 years if I do the math right. My friend Sharon there has been a member for 50. Everybody has their number. How about this number? In 20 days, Ellen and I are getting married here. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Right here, right this spot. I was talking this week with Karen Frederick, and I want to quote something she said. She was referring to her uncle Jerry. Apparently he said, there are 3 eras of history. There's before my time, there's when I got here, and then there's after me. You all know about the history of the church, and I'm going to skip to when I got here, specifically the search for a new senior minister. When I asked to be placed on the search committee, I was thinking, this is like joining a committee at First Parish, like membership. We're going to meet once a month, and oh yeah, well, I'm going to skip this week, or skip this month. Clearly, I didn't know what I didn't know. The search committee has, and still has, a very strong covenant. And so you should know that whatever I say, I'm speaking on my behalf, not on behalf of the committee or anyone on the committee. It was very clear to me soon, 2022 was when we started actually, that this was going to be a very serious undertaking. Every day I'd go home and I had this thought in my head, don't screw this up. You get one shot. And we had cottage meetings, many of you were there, and they were fun, but they were also a way for me to contribute how I saw all of you, what the culture here was, the good and the bad. It was kind of like online dating. I first met the candidates on Zoom, and I'd ask, did I like that person? Did that person like me? Would I ask them on a date? And by the way, that's how I met Ellen, online. 2013. On pre-candidate weekends, when we snuck them in, we often would have a dinner together, and then some of us would take turns driving the candidate back to their place of lodging. And I remember on one weekend, and by the way, all of us, we always vacuumed our car, and we wanted it, pristine and clean, and I used to put this little smelly thing in there so it'd smell nice, and trying to make the best impression. And I vividly remember taking a candidate to their room after a dinner. It was a weekend when the temperature was 12 degrees below zero. You remember? Yeah. And that evening, twice, once at night, once in the morning, the pipes burst in the building where he was staying. The fire alarm went off, and guests had to leave twice, often without warm clothing. He was so cool about this. He was so not freaked out about being outside, 12 below, that I thought, man, I hope he chooses us. And I still think that the best person won. Stewardship. Is great. Stewardship is about money, yes, but it's also about maintaining and protecting and beautifying. So don't forget that. Come to the wedding, the snacks are going to be great.
Thank you so much, Rich. And we are coming to the rapidly approaching the finish line of our stewardship campaign. So if you have not gotten your pledge in, please consider getting your pledge in soon and giving thoughtfully and generously. Now, if you will please rise again, we will share our unison affirmation, which is in your order of service. Man, was it cold that weekend. Our time for all ages, our story today is called Rabbit's Gifts. This story is adapted from the Creating Home curriculum of Tapestry of Faiths by Christy Olson and Jessica York. So, a long time ago, before there were people on earth, there were many different animals that lived all over the place. Some of the animals lived in the grasslands, but they did not live too close to each other because they thought that was the best way. They liked their space. One of those animals was Hyena. Now, one day Hyena decided he needed a new home. He found the perfect place, far away from all of the other animals, near sweet water, protected by the shade of the baobab tree. Now, Hyena thought that he was the most important animal, so he wanted his home to be as grand as possible, so all of the other animals would know he was the most important animal. He had the best builder in the land build it and decorate it for him. It took a month to build, and when it was done, Hyena threw a party to show it off. Now, the party was a little boring, to be honest, because Hyena was more interested in showing off his house than in having a good time with his friends, but everyone agreed that the house was very grand. Now, Hyena invited everyone to his party, and everyone came and admired the new home, everyone, that is, except Rabbit. This made Hyena mad, so the next morning he went to visit Rabbit, who was sitting outside in front of his modest rabbit home, and Rabbit was playing around, tapping out a rhythm on a log with a stick, like so. "Why did you not come to my party last night to see my new home?" demanded Hyena. Rabbit stopped his tapping. He did not like demands, so he got a little angry. "Who made you, Grand Lord Hyena?" said Rabbit. "I was busy. Besides, I heard your party was a little boring, to be honest." "You're just jealous because you do not have such a grand home as me," said Hyena. "Well, I could have one if I wanted one," said Rabbit. "I could have a house that was even better than yours in half the time, and for sure I can throw a better party, too." "Okay," said Hyena. "Fine. I challenge you to build a home better than mine in half the time. In 2 weeks, I will return to see your home, and I expect to go to the best party ever given. And if you can't provide these things you have bragged about, you do have to call me Grand Lord Hyena for a year and do my laundry. And off he stormed. Thought Rabbit, I've done it this time. How am I going to build a grand house in 2 weeks' time? Then, because he was a tricky fellow, he came up with an idea. He visited all of his animal neighbors and he asked them to help him build a fine new home. And if they did, he promised his animal friends he would give them 2 great gifts when they were done. And all the animals wanted to see what these great gifts would be, so they agreed. Now, I need this house really quick, said Rabbit, so why don't you bring your families with you, so you're not having to go back and forth every day, because remember, the animals lived very far apart in those days. We can get the job done quicker. The animals agreed. So they built huts for their families at the site of Rabbit's new home, and they went to work building a new house for him. And because so many animals worked on the home, it was easily built within 2 weeks, which was a good thing because Rabbit was not working on the house at all. He spent his time lying around, tapping out beats on a log with a stick, like so. When Hyena returned in 2 weeks, he found all the animals living in huts around Rabbit's new home, a home that looked a lot like his own. He said to Rabbit, "This looks just like my place. What makes this house better than mine?" "Don't you see," said Rabbit, "I don't just have a home, I have a village. Now all of my animal friends live close by, and it's easier for us to visit and have fun together." And Hyena looked around and saw kids laughing and playing together, people out on their stoops talking and sharing, people going back and forth, people having meals. And this was Rabbit's first gift, the gift of community. Hyena had to admit that it was very nice to have a community of friends nearby. "But," said Hyena, "you still have to throw the best party ever. That was also part of the bet." "Watch and listen," said Rabbit. He invited everyone in the village to gather round. Then he took the log and the stick and began beating out the rhythm he'd been practicing for 2 weeks. They'd never heard anything like it. Soon all of the animals were dancing and singing and clapping their hands. Everyone was having a great time. "See," said Rabbit, "my second gift is the gift of getting down together. That is why my party is better." But Hyena was not listening to Rabbit anymore anyway. He was too busy getting down. And that is the story of Rabbit and Hyena. Thank you for sharing it with me. We're going to sing the kids out to their religious education classes with Jason Shelton's Children's Blessing.
Good morning. I'm Lori Groves. I'm a member of the Lay Pastoral Care Team, and this is the moment in each service where we share candles of joy and concern. We ask you to keep your thoughts focused and be as brief as you can. I'll be here after the service if anybody wants to light a candle of joy or concern in private. I'm going to light another candle for the joys and concerns that we hold deep in our hearts. And again, I'll be here after the service if anybody would like to light a candle in private. Thank you.
Here in our First Parish home, your offering fuels our shared journey of growth and belonging. Through your generosity, we nurture a community where each person finds support, inspiration, and acceptance. Your gift isn't just about sustenance. It's an investment in your own spiritual journey and in the vitality of our inclusive fellowship. Your offering will now be received.
So in 1964, the U.S. Surgeon General released a landmark report that told a nation of smokers that cigarette smoking was in fact very, very bad for you. And the report was followed by concerted government actions at the federal level, at the local level, to educate the public on the health hazards of smoking, to encourage a reduction in the prevalence of smoking. And a 2014 article in the Journal of the American Medical Association credits that 1964 Surgeon General's report with saving some 8 million American lives. Or put another way, with preventing 8 million premature deaths, the majority of which would have occurred in people under 65. 8 million lives saved. Well, there's a new report out from our current Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, report released in 2023 that names a new health epidemic that is threatening our individual and collective well-being. The economic impact of this epidemic is measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars per year in terms of health costs, in terms of lost productivity. The health impact on individuals is equivalent in harm to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, an almost 30% increase in the risk of premature death. It is associated with heart attacks, stroke, susceptibility to respiratory viruses, but it is not COVID. It is associated with anxiety and depression, with self-harm, with dementia, with violence and social instability, with addiction. But it is not the opioid epidemic. The epidemic named in the new Surgeon General report is an epidemic of social isolation and loneliness. Social isolation and loneliness. It's not a new problem, but it is a worsening problem. Over the last 20 years, the amount of time that people report spending with friends has steadily declined, down 20 hours a month. The amount of time we spend alone has increased commensurately. Loneliness is significant in the older population, but some of the highest rates of loneliness are found among young adults. For the 15 to 24 age group, time with friends has declined 70% over the last 2 decades. 70%. The number of friendships that people report having has also declined. In 1990, a quarter of Americans reported having 3 or fewer close friends. Today, half of Americans would say the same thing. And as a result, before the pandemic, half of Americans reported feelings of loneliness in their life. And that was pre-COVID, half of Americans. And we've been talking about the average American's increasing isolation, at least since Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, if you remember that, which came out 24 years ago. And now, 24 years later, we can talk about a loneliness epidemic in America, according to the Surgeon General. An epidemic of disconnection. And I know, at least anecdotally, that this is a conclusion that resonates with many, many people when you talk about loneliness as a weight in their life. And we relatedly talk about a health crisis for young people, a young adult mental health crisis, which is something on the hearts and minds of many a parent and a concerned elder. And in fact, the Surgeon General reports that the self-reported loneliness of young adults has been growing every year since 1990. Every year since 1990, young adults say they are lonelier than the year before. Now, depending on our inclination, we can blame it on cell phones and social media, the breakdown of the family structure, the rise of the 2-income household, increased economic pressures to be working all the time, the gig economy, any number of things. And there are, for sure, some structural forces at play in these trends of us spending less time together. Family sizes are shrinking, to begin with, so we have fewer children and siblings to connect with. People report spending fewer hours each week engaging positively with their family and having less positive interactions when they do spend time with each other. And all of us being on our phones all the time probably does have something to do with that. And I love my cell phone so much. So much. And the increased economic pressures that households face probably has something to do with that too, with us being stressed out and overburdened with worries and student loan debt and all of those things. Fewer people are getting married or forming stable, long-term partnered households. They do it later in life. More people are living alone than ever before. Fewer people are participating in community life or joining social organizations. Only about 1 in 6 Americans report feeling connected to their local community. And there are complex reasons for all of these things, representing changing pressures, changing opportunities. We're a more mobile society, for one thing. I have 2 brothers. We all live 1,000 miles apart from each other. None of us live near our parents, and that was by choice. And it has consequences in terms of how connected we are, right? I know of families where the adult siblings still all get together at their mom's house for Sunday dinner every week because they all live in the same town that they grew up in. And I envy that. And me and my siblings made different choices. Social media has radically transformed our cultural landscape, and this has fostered connection and disconnection. It has obviously allowed people to be literally more connected. We are uber connected. We are 24/7 connected across time and across place, from almost any part of the globe to any other part of the globe. I attended a concert in Indianapolis that had people zooming in from Afghanistan. And the internet in particular has also allowed people with niche interests to find their people, right? If you have an interest, you can find someone in the world who shares that interest and you can connect. And so we see the rise of highly specialized and devoted fan clubs and discussion groups and social networks where people can connect, share their love of almost everything you can imagine. If you love Minecraft fan fiction, there is a place on the internet for you. And for many marginalized youth in particular, who might otherwise be socially isolated, this has been a godsend. For LGBTQ youth, for neurodivergent youth, this has been a godsend, a life rope of connection. When I was a fairly isolated single dad myself, newly relocated to Indianapolis, this was in my mid-20s, I found a supportive community in an internet parenting discussion group. This was before Facebook or social media, but there were like discussion forums. And that social network was incredibly important to me. And at the same time, young people report that increased time on social media leads to increased feelings of loneliness and isolation. People compare their lives to the carefully curated, artificially constructed images of others. They feel lacking. They feel judged and inadequate. They feel like they're missing out. Cyberbullying happens, we know. And just the physical fact of time spent online on phones or computers means less time spent person to person, face to face. So social media and our phones seem to be making us lonelier, and yet we find it very hard to disconnect. And you know, social media is addictive by design, pushing those dopamine levers in our brains. And all these changes are complex and multifaceted. They reflect social forces we might celebrate or decry or both. But the upshot is, Americans are more weakly connected to one another, and they are currently spending more time alone. Americans are more isolated, just as a matter of fact, and we report feeling more loneliness as our emotional response to that reality. And loneliness is not the same as isolation per se, right? Having interaction with other people is a fact. Having access to interaction with other people is a fact. Loneliness is a feeling, it's a subjective experience. And they're related, but the mere fact of being around other people does not mean that we have social connection. You can be very isolated living in the middle of a gigantic apartment building or a dense downtown center. You can be lonely while drowning in a 24/7 barrage of connection and information. The Surgeon General says the desired state that we call social connection is a function not just of the number of relationships we have, but also how well they support us and meet our needs and how positively we feel about them. And these positive social connections are not just a nice thing to have. They appear to meet a very deep human need. Paul Dolan, a professor of behavioral sciences at the London School of Economics, quoted in a New York Times article, says, "We are not meant to be lonely as a species. We're not meant to be lonely as a species." He says, if you were to think of the most significant intervention to improve life expectancy after quitting smoking, it is this: don't be lonely. Lack of connection can literally make you sick. Loneliness is associated with inflammation and other stress markers in the body and a whole host of illnesses that can shorten life expectancy, heart attack, stroke, and more. The stress of loneliness is associated with less healthy life choices, compounding that, with increased rates of addiction, with diminished mental health. And when we are socially connected, on the other hand, we not only have higher rates of well-being to begin with, but we have more access to support and resources when we need help. And we all need help sometimes, right? That's just being human. The Surgeon General report notes that there's an equity component to isolation and loneliness. It does not fall on all people and all communities equally. People with lower incomes, for example, are more likely to experience loneliness and isolation. People from marginalized communities are more likely to experience isolation. And people don't necessarily have control over the infrastructure, the social infrastructure that they're embedded in, right? So access to things like parks, libraries, public transportation, safe walkable neighborhoods, volunteer opportunities, mentoring programs, childcare, and on, access to these things is hardly equitably distributed throughout society. We know that. And so when you talk about confronting loneliness, there's a strong policy component to this conversation. Because one response to the epidemic of isolation is to collectively decide to invest in the social infrastructure that leads to more connection. And such an investment doesn't just benefit individuals. A connected society is more prosperous. As people come together to share ideas and resources and skills and mentoring, connectedness is good for the economy. Connected neighborhoods care for their residents in a myriad of ways that social service organizations cannot possibly duplicate alone. Connected communities respond more resiliently to natural disasters because those same connected neighbors are often the first on the scene after a storm or a fire or a flood. Connected young people have better educational outcomes, which again makes all of society better off. And on the other hand, our increased isolation has deleterious social effects which propagate disconnection. Just like isolation can make the body sick, it can make the body politic sick. The Surgeon General points to something he calls core discussion networks as being important to a healthy society. So core discussion networks are the circles of people who have conversations on timely but difficult topics such as politics, finance, world events, religion, health, and more, right? These are the circles of people where we talk about things that matter. And when these core discussion networks are large, they're widespread, and importantly, when they bring together people of different perspectives, they promote a tolerant society. But studies show that our core discussion networks are smaller than they have ever been. And they are more homogeneous, right? So we are increasingly caught up in bubbles and echo chambers. You can call this the Fox Newsification and the MSNBCification of America. And as a result, more and more Americans report feeling that there is very little benefit in engaging with people of opposing viewpoints. We don't even want to try and talk to each other. We've given up before we've even started. And when we do, 6 out of 10 people report it is frustrating to talk to someone with a different political viewpoint. And one result is we trust each other less. In 1972, 45% of Americans felt they could reliably trust other Americans, their neighbors. In 2016, that number had fallen to 30%. Less than a third of us feel that generally we trust our fellow citizens. And related to these core discussion networks are what we call bridging connections. And these are connections that we form with people outside of our usual circles. We all have usual circles. That's normal. That's life. Bridging connections carry us outside of those circles. Right? So these are connections that form bridges between people with different life experiences, different religions, different worldviews, different politics. Right? These are the kinds of connections people make in bowling leagues, to go back to Robert Putnam, bridge clubs, professional associations, book clubs, right? When we're volunteering at the soup kitchen or in local government. These are the social opportunities to come together for some common interest where we can form relationships despite our differences. Bridging connections make society more tolerant, more trusting, more collaborative and cooperative. They discourage prejudice and extremism and violence. And in their absence, our society has become more reactive and more polarized, which we feel. Once upon a time, religious communities were important places where Americans formed those bridging connections and positive social connections in general. In 1999, 70% of Americans said they belonged to a church, a synagogue, or a mosque. 25 years later, this number is 47%. Which is the first time in the history of people being asked that the number has fallen below 50%, right? Lower than ever. And the increase in social isolation and loneliness seems to have increased, has moved in tandem with this sharp drop in religious participation. As Americans exit religious communities en masse without necessarily having found a good replacement community to join. And lest I be accused of romanticizing the past, we know that in the golden days of yore, all of those communities and civic organizations, churches, yes, but also labor unions and PTAs and professional organizations and neighborhood associations, all of these could be and sometimes were places of groupthink, of conformity, of racial segregation and sexism and other forms of abuse. Right? The mere fact of a group of people gathered together does not always promote tolerance. Sometimes it is quite the opposite. And we know this is still true today. And then also, there are places like this one, where people of all different ages, with diverse backgrounds and beliefs and perspectives, come together to sing, to share their joys and sorrows like we just did, to support each other, to pledge greater service to the community like we do every Sunday, to learn together, to laugh and share meals, to grow in kindness and compassion, and to celebrate values like pluralism and generosity and interdependence with love at the center. Also, there are places like this one. Now, one of those things that you pick up randomly in seminary is that the word religion comes from a Latin root meaning to tie or to bind. And so religion is a way of being bound together. I don't know if that's actually true. So please don't come at me with some Wikipedia article after the service, right? But it is an appropriate way to think about Unitarian Universalism as a religion, in that its living tradition has increasingly come to understand itself as being a religion about relationship. Unitarian Universalism is a religion about relationship, about all of the ways in which we are bound up together by necessity, by social and scientific facts, by inheritance, and by choice. And Unitarian Universalism asks the question not whether we are bound up, but how will we be bound up together? Right? We take interdependence as our starting point, and we ask, how are we going to be in right relationship with each other? How are we going to be in right relationship with the natural world, with the divine, however we understand that word, and with our own self, our own conscience, our own integrity? And to be sure, from our proud Emersonian individualist, nonconformist roots, we lionize the individual pursuit of truth, but the practice of our religion at its best draws our attention again and again back to the community, to the ways in which we are all connected in love, interconnected through our participation in the web of life, needing each other, flourishing together, supporting each other, and our way of being together, which is grounded in consent and covenant or mutual promise, encourages us to risk making ever deeper connections in a way that still respects and protects our individuality. Right? We seek to be a place where you can show up as your authentic self, as your whole self, and know that you will be welcomed. And so in confronting the loneliness epidemic, UU congregations have a positive role to play, not just as communities, or even as religious communities, but as a particular kind of religious community. One that affirms communal values like kindness and compassion, curiosity and pluralism, and collective care, and one that affirms the inherent worth and dignity of all people, One where challenging conversations that bridge differences are possible because we covenant to seek the truth in love. That's the kind of religious community we're building together. And this congregation has a very proud tradition of seeking to make a positive impact in the community and the world. You say the church has left the building. And I want us to also remember that we can make a very positive impact on the community and the world by inviting people into the building, where they can form those life-giving connections. And this is not just Sunday morning services, but also Friday potlucks, and that afternoon game club that's happening next Sunday, and the midweek youth offerings, and joining the choir and the concerts, the small groups, and on and on. So many opportunities for connection happen here. And it's not even just our offerings. Bedford Family Connections happens here. Community dance groups meet here. Music recitals happen here, right? On and on. And every one of those meetings is not just fostering connection, it's bringing people into this space which witnesses to those values exemplified by our principles that foster still more positive connection. And sometimes those connections are life-saving. I'm very proud that today we have a new Pride Progressive flag that honors the inherent worth and dignity of transgender and non-binary individuals explicitly. If you stand outside our sanctuary church this morning, you will see it. And that message of connection is a lifeline to people. It is life-saving. And when we bring people into this space, we are affirming something that people desperately need. Providing an antidote to the loneliness epidemic in the form of UU community is an act of service. Doesn't look like service in the same way that volunteering at a soup kitchen does or lobbying a congressperson does. It doesn't look like activism. It may look like laughing together or singing or serving someone a cup of coffee or putting out a plate of gluten-free brownies. It may look like arguing respectfully with a stranger, asking after someone's parents, recommending a show, connecting someone to an opportunity, or giving someone a hug. It may look like noticing that someone is alone and risking to go over and say hello. It may look like calling the person who you noticed wasn't here today. It may look like the most ordinary thing in the world, and it may be the thing that saves someone today from the epidemic of disconnection. It may be the thing that saves all of us, little by little, day by day, if we keep risking to go out, if we keep risking to invite people in. May it be so, and amen. Our closing hymn today is number 128. For all that is our life, would you please rise in body or spirit? Our closing words today are by David and Beverly Bombon. Our church exists to proclaim the gospel that each human being is infinitely precious. We wish to be a church where we encounter each other with wonder, appreciation, and expectation, and where we call out of each other's strengths, wisdom, and compassion that we never knew we had. Amen. Go in connection. Go in peace.